pretty much preparing for the worst case scenario, but I think what ended up happening was still nothing that we expected. We could have just potentially lost an entire generation of sea turtles. So here in South Texas, we have the ability to call our backyard the Laguna Madre. And the Laguna Madre is a shallow seagrass bed that starts a little bit south of Corpus Christi and runs all the way south to Mexico. And it has become a critical habitat for juvenile green sea turtles, as it has become one of the top 3 places in the world for them to come and feed. Sea turtles are ectotherms, which means that they utilize the temperature of their environment in order to help regulate their body temperature, which means that they also have thresholds, and for them it appears to be whenever the water temperature drops below 50 degrees. Once the water temperature drops below 50 degrees, and it often does so very quickly, what will happen is it will send the sea turtles into a hypothermic shock. They become very weak and debilitated, incapable of even sometimes lifting their head up to take a breath. And so they start washing up on the shorelines, which is when we get to help. Cold sun events are not something uncommon to us here in Corpus Christi. Each and every year we probably get 1 or 2 minor events that would consist of maybe 50 to 100 turtles.
It's snowing out. Like, when does that happen? People are out frolicking in the street, you know? Damn, like, amazing.
So a cold sun event was declared on February 13th, 2021. We were pretty much preparing for the worst case scenario, but I think what ended up happening and what we received was still nothing that we expected, and that's because the weather that occurred was very unprecedented for our areas. It's not very often that we get temperatures that drop below 50 degrees. So in January of 2018, all throughout the state of Texas, over 5,000 sea turtles were rescued, rehabilitated, and the majority of them released. However, this year, because of the unprecedented weather, because of the temperatures that we're not used to seeing, we more than double what we did in January 2018, with over 12,000 sea turtles were rescued all throughout the state of Texas. And so at that point, we relied so heavily on the community. And I think to me, that is one of the most beautiful things that, was a result of this event, is really seeing the community come together. We had local islanders as well as boaters and surfers and people out on kayaks and fishermen and just concerned citizens. We had people drop by the center to drop off, supplies or donations, or just pass along a kind word. We had local businesses and restaurants sponsoring lunch and dinner for our volunteers. Having the support of our community, that just meant the world to us. So when the sea turtles are admitted into our facility, typically they go through what we call a dry docking phase, and we start to slowly warm their body up. So when you have turtles who have had their body temperature severely dropped very quickly and sent into that hypothermic shock, it would do just as much damage to try to warm them up just as quick. So we give them a slow roll, about 24 to 48 hours in a climate-controlled area where their body temperature can start to rise. As they begin to get more active on the floor, then we start to put them in water in our recovery pools, and that's when we begin swim tests. So when a sea turtle is put into the water, there's usually 1 or 2 volunteers watching the tank, and what we're doing is we're observing them as they're first put into the water. We want to make sure that they don't immediately sink, that they're swimming around and about the pool very active, that their eyes are open, that they're strong enough to go to the bottom of the tank in a resting state, but also then return to the surface of the water for a breath. And that is what determines if a sea turtle is ready or not. So the majority of our sea turtles fortunately passed the swim tests, and so that's when they were then medically cleared for release. Now the decision was made to release turtles offshore by our veterinarian and our director, Dr. Tim Tristan. At this point, it was about getting the turtles back where they belong. So that's when we contacted the Port Aransas Fisherman's Wharf, and the wharf cat took our volunteers and over 1,000 sea turtles 13 miles offshore, where we reached a water temperature of 59 degrees. And then the turtles were released by slide.
You were like, whoa! And then they were like, whoa! And then we were like, whoa!
We slid the turtles down that slide where they hit the water, immediately knew they were home, and took off beautifully. Now the offshore release was also a good spot because it allowed us to disperse them a little bit more. And so you didn't have such a high concentration being released off of one beach, and they also didn't have to fight the surf in order to make it offshore where they belonged. Now, unfortunately, I am afraid that these cold sun crises are something that we might start to experience more often. As I mentioned, it's not uncommon for us to have a cold sun event, a minor event, 1 or 2 a year. But these crises, like the one we first went through in January of 2018, and then now this previous one in February of 2021, these are large-scale cold sun events that have the potential to wipe out an entire population. And when you think about climate change, it's not just global warming, right? So it's not just everything's getting hotter, but it's the increase in the severity of weather. So you have areas that are going to get hotter and areas that are going to get colder. And for us, that means that if we start to see these lower air temperatures become more regular, then that's going to affect our water temperatures as they're going to decrease. And so therefore, then we would have these cold sun crises potentially occurring more and more frequently. Now, the Texas Sealife Centre is an organization that's staffed solely through volunteers and funded solely through donations. As I mentioned, we still have a very big need for donations right now, not only to offset the expenses that we had during the cold stun, but in order to care for the more severe medical cases that we have right now. I'm currently sitting in front of our recovery pool number 3, and this is our medical treatment tank, the more critical cases. So a lot of the turtles in this tank are very debilitated. They have boat wounds, flipper wounds, head injuries, but they also have a virus called fibropapillomatosis, which will require surgery. Out of the 55 sea turtles that we have on property, over half of them have this virus, which means that for us, the work really is just beginning. So if you find it in your heart to donate to our cause, help us continue to save sea life, and help these animals get back into the wild, you can do so by visiting our website at www.texassealifecenter.org. Every penny helps in order for us to continue our mission and supporting and saving our local sea life.